Hey guys, today we're going to be going over, is red dot better than iron sights? Let's get right into the first 30-second breakdown. That's where in the first 30 seconds, give or take, I give you guys my exact thoughts before we get into the full review. That way you guys can just stop watching the video because now you know exactly what I think, or you can continue watching and find out why I say those things, and it does help out my channel and the algorithm by watching the full video. So long story short, red dot is superior to iron sights. It's just a better sighting system, and it's much easier to acquire one dot opposed to having two things having to line up and with a target. With the red dot, you just have the dot, you just point and you shoot. It's a much easier process. Now there is a learning curve to red dot. When I went from iron sights to red dot, I felt like I became a worse shooter until I actually learned and trained much more with the red dot. Now let's get into the full video and go over the pros and cons of both the red dot along with the iron sights. So first we'll start with the red dot. Like I said in the first 30-second breakdown, the red dot is a much superior optic when it comes to sighting just because you're looking at one dot. It's a lot easier just to be able to pull that up and put it on what you're shooting at opposed to lining two sights up and then pointing that to what you want to shoot at. So that's a big benefit to this. And along with that, it comes with shooting farther distances. Shooting past 40 yards is much easier with the red dot just because of that reasoning. With iron sights, it's kind of hard because you somewhat cover up your target at a much farther distance when you're shooting at 40 yards and beyond, depending how small your target is. With the red dot, it just puts that dot on whatever you're shooting at, and you can turn the dot down if you need to. You can turn it up, depending on what MOA you go with. A lot of the newer stuff is much smaller. You can go with 1 MOA, 3 MOA. I think this is the 2.5 MOA SRO. So the dot is significantly smaller, and you can make it smaller by dimming it down a little bit and making it much more crisp. Now let's go over some cons for the red dot. One of them being the fact that it's just an electronic. It can go wrong, things can happen, it can break, and that is kind of a downfall. It has batteries, just like your flashlights, your optics, anything else on your gun that has batteries and is an electronic thing can break and go wrong. It's something that you have to worry about and think about. But I think that they've made them strong enough and more durable enough that you can trust these things. I've never really had any issues with any of my red dots with electronic-wise, anything going wrong with them. As long as you're buying from trusted companies that you know work well, you should never have any issues. But it is something that I feel like I should put in the cons because it's something that can go wrong. Along with that, you're going to have the fact that really bad weather like rain, snow, sleet, things like that does affect it. You get that on the screen or the glass of your optic and you're going to have some issues. There's open emitters in here. Something gets in the open emitter, you're going to have issues. So that is another thing to worry about. So when you're shooting out in the rain, it's going to be a lot more difficult with the red dot. So again, another thing that you want to look into. I personally have done some shooting out in the rain and different weather with these, and it makes it more difficult. It's not like it's impossible. It's not like you can't use that anymore. It's just going to have another layer of difficult that you add to that. That is something you want to note when picking a sighting solution for your gun, depending where you live. Maybe you live somewhere that is really snowy or really rainy all the time. Maybe a red dot isn't the choice for you, but it's not something that I've noticed that really causes enough issue that I would take this off of my gun. Another downfall is going to be the price. Red dots and the mounting solutions are expensive, especially if you're going to get a reputable one like Trijicon. The RMRs, SROs are very expensive red dots. So that is going to be something you have to look into when adding this to a handgun. Eventually, I can see law enforcement completely switching over to red dots just because of the benefits of having these and how much better and accurate they are. But the biggest thing that's holding a lot of people and agencies up is the expense. You now have to either buy all MOS guns or you have to send every one of your guns up to get milled. Now you have to buy the whole agency red dots, get them mounted, get them serviced every year. So I can see eventually it happening, but right now with everything going on, budgets going towards different things, it's probably not going to happen right away, but I can see eventually this being a new normal for law enforcement. But that price really holds things up. So definitely a downfall because iron sights you can get for $100, $150 are like the high-end ones, the really good, like Trijicon HDXRs like I have here are close to that $150. So that's about your max you're going to be spending. Red dots, you're looking anywhere from $100 to $500 and up, depending on what you're getting. So it's definitely an expense. You got to get it milled, which is another $125 or so, depending where you're going, or plate systems and the MOS. So it's definitely an expense and something to look into when wanting to purchase this. And the last thing I'm going to say, which is a con and a pro, is the fact that it has a learning curve. So at first, when you shoot this, you're going to feel like it's making you worse or you can't use this because you're going to notice every imperfection that you do with your trigger press, your grip. Because that red dot is so sensitive, you'll be able to see everything. With iron sights, you don't really notice it. It kind of hides those pretty easily. With the red dot, you will start noticing all those things. So it's really different when you first pick this up and start shooting with it. One of the things I had trouble with is when I would shoot, and then bringing it down, trying to find that red dot again. So trying to figure out exactly where that red dot is every time was a big learning curve, along with the fact that as you're pulling your trigger, you're noticing shakes and movements in that dot that you never noticed before because of the fact that the irons hide that really well. So it's a con in the fact that you have to train a lot to switch, but it's a pro in the fact that I think it made me a better shooter in the end because I noticed all those imperfections I never noticed before, and it forced me to fix them to get comfortable with the red dot. So it kind of starts out as a con, having to relearn almost, or I don't want to say relearn, but train a little bit harder to get better at this. But it's a pro in the end in the fact that you become a better shooter because you notice little things that you didn't notice before. So to wrap that pro and con up, basically, it's more accurate. It's better to shoot with. It's easier to shoot with once you get good at it, but it is expensive and it does have some downfalls with weather and the fact that it's electronic. So as long as you're okay with those two things and get over the fact that it has a battery and you're gonna have to change that eventually, and you gotta kind of maintain it and make sure it's okay, and in bad weather, it might not be as accurate as you want it to be, then this is definitely something you're gonna wanna pick up. So now let's go over the pros and cons of the iron sights. So these are Trijicon HDXRs. Absolutely love these sights. I have some videos on them if you wanna see that. But these are my preferred sights for concealed carry. So this is one of the guns that I carry often. This used to be my primary concealed carry gun until I've had a couple other ones that I've been switching and changing up to. But this is a really good gun and with really nice sights. Let's go over to the pros of these iron sights. One of the big ones is they're cheap. Like I said, the max for these are going to be about $150. You can get them as cheap as $50 if you need to. They're proven. They've been used for years, and people have never had issues with them. They're very low maintenance. You really don't have to do anything once they get put on. There's really not a ton of requirements to work on them or have to keep them a certain way like an iron sight or a red dot would be, where you have to keep battery life up and make sure the thing is running properly. Something that I think everybody's really trained on from the start is iron sights. I think that's kind of what everyone starts on, so it's already something that everyone's kind of comfortable with. So that's why you have that learning curve with the red dot, is because it's a little different. Some people don't run that system too often other than on rifles like these, which is a lot easier because you have more points of contact and it's much easier to keep that stable opposed to where you're swaying a little bit more with the handgun. So iron sights is a little bit more easy for people to understand because it's just that's always been there and what people trained with. Another benefit is the fact that they work in all weather. You really don't have to have any issues with if it's raining or if it's snowing. It's not going to affect your iron sights in the way they work. And now for the cons of the iron sight is basically the opposite of the pros of the red dot, is the fact that it's just not as accurate. And that's going to be the biggest thing that makes this superior, is just the accuracy, not only at close distance, but at farther distance. You can shoot a lot more easily with this past that 40, 50 yards, going back into 100 yards. Just is much more easy, especially the fact that iron sights will cover up that target a lot when you're shooting much more farther distances like that. Now, the last thing I want to note, and this really doesn't affect a ton of people, is night vision. This has a big benefit with night vision opposed to this. It can be done with iron sights, but it's so much easier with a red dot. I wanted to mention that in the last part just because not as many of you are going to be running night vision. I always hear, okay, hey, my iron sights, it's not like an optic that can break if I drop it, or the batteries can fall out and it will crack my glass and I'll never be able to use it because it's super weak and you can't drop them. You can also drop a handgun and move the back post. I've done that before. There is just a screw that holds the front sight post before. I have had a screw loosen in the front post. It happens. So it's not just an iron sight or red dot issue. Definitely is a problem that if you drop this, it could crack, it could break. But for the most part, usually these are still going to work. Even if they have cracked glass, that's not going to affect it too much. So at least enough where you can get a new one if you have to. But if you dropped it in a situation where you're using it, for the most part, you're still going to be able to use it unless it was a really, really bad drop where it shattered it and bent it and gave more issues. But if you just have a cracked glass, you shouldn't have any issues still being able to aim with that. So all in all, both of these systems are really good. They're proven. They've been used enough that I trust either of them. I just think, in my mind, red dots are much easier. It's just like rifles. Red dots are far superior than your iron sights. Iron sights, they work. They're simple. They do what they're supposed to, but there's a reason that very, very few people run irons as a primary. They're usually using their red dots or scopes, any kind of optic system, because it's just a much easier system to be able to pick up and use and get accurate out to distance. So handguns are slowly making their way that way. I see a lot of people switching, but there's still a long way to go. If you have iron sights, don't think that you absolutely have to switch. If you're good with this and you're comfortable with it, then stick with it. If you like it, there's nothing wrong with having to switch. Don't get peer pressure and have to go to optic. I'm just letting you guys know there are pros and cons to both systems, and this is a more accurate system. Just wanted to give you guys that information. So if you guys have a thought thought or a pro and con that I didn't mention, please mention that in the comments. I'd love to know what you guys think about these systems and which ones you like better. If you guys want to help out the channel and the things that I do here, there are some discount codes down in the description of companies that I trust. Using those discount codes gives you guys a small break on purchasing items, and it also gives me a small kickback, which helps me out a ton in the channel. Another way is there's a link to my website. From there, you can go to other websites like Brownells, Palmetto Star Armor, Aero Precision, Premier Body Armor. Anything you buy using my link also gives me a small kickback and shows companies I'm generating traffic, which is also a really good thing for this channel and helps me be able to afford ammo and other supplies for testing and reviewing products. So those things help me a ton. If you do that, I appreciate it. If not, I just appreciate you guys being here and watching the video. Another company that supports me a ton in the things that I do is Howitzer. Absolutely love these guys. They donate 5% of proceeds to charity, which is really cool because they've donated a ton of money over the last year or so, and that's cool to see them continue to grow and do the things that they're doing, along with the fact that they have really cool design t-shirts, and this is basically all that I wear. So there's a link to them in the description as well. A lot of things have been changing. Again, the backdrop is different. This is my third video, I think, with the new backdrop and the new lighting. So again, if you guys have any thoughts or any improvements, please let me know. Or if you just like the lighting and think it looks nice, please let me know, because I'm interested to know what you guys think of all that. So thanks again, guys. The academy is almost over here, and I'm almost done with school, which means I'll have a ton more time to actually do stuff. I just applied for a new job, had an interview, and waiting to hear a call back from that. So hopefully by the time that I post this video, I'll hear back from that and see if I've got a new job, which is really cool because it's still kind of the same career path, but switching up a different position. So really excited about that. And thank you guys for being here, and I appreciate you all.